Government surplus cars for auction.
You posted those online last time.
No, you did.
I'm posting them online this time.
For all your government information, firstgov.gov.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thanks for joining us again. I'm Bettina Lawton, your host of Women Talk Business, a program endorsed by the Executive Women's Roundtable here in Tysons Corner, Virginia. And my guest tonight is Dawn McCoy, the president and CEO of Flourish Leadership Group. Too many S's for me tonight, I guess. And we're talking about how Dawn ran, first time, for school board in Sacramento and won in a field of 9 candidates, and 3 people won, and Dawn was one of them. And we've talked about the skills you needed and getting sort of that campaign organized, and then you get elected. Mm-hmm. And from reading your book, I know that what you found when you got on the school board was not exactly what you expected you were walking into. Okay. And a whole different set of skills needed to be brought forth. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that. Let me tell our viewers a little bit about what you found mm-hmm. in terms of the school board. You had no staff, essentially. You had no office. There was no real support. And it was pretty much up to you to figure out how to get it all to work. Mm-hmm. It was a citywide position, so you had a broad scope, lots of different constituencies, all making demands, different issues. And you had a lot of difficulty. You had a school board that was used to and apparently content with mm-hmm. relying on the superintendent and the school district staff, and that wasn't quite your approach. Mm-hmm. So tell us about what kind of skills you needed. What'd you find? You apparently, at one point, had your mic turned off. They didn't mm-hmm. particularly want to hear what you had to say, mm-hmm. so it didn't sound like a real, wonderful experience, at least at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So what happened and what kind of skills did mm-hmm. you end up having to
That's right. Bettina, it was actually quite interesting. Some of my first few board meetings were attended by about 2,000 to 3,000. There were big auditoriums at one of the high schools. And it was actually about the closure of a high school, a historic high school, and what were we going to do with the failing scores of the students at this school. I asked a lot of questions. And I don't know that I was supposed to ask a lot of questions being sort of the new kid on the block.
Right.
And that led to some contention, obviously, and different dynamics that I talk about in the book that were very public in the community that raged on for 4 years about this one closure. And I really found that there were a set of skills that I needed that were different, that I sort of evolved into. One would be really sort of getting the lay of the land. Mm-hmm. I talk about that, not just in a candidate sort of figuring out how to run a campaign or how to be a candidate, mm-hmm. but really, again, tapping in on those communication skills. Here, the shift was not just being someone who was talking mm-hmm. and developing ideas, but doing more listening and processing of information. The second, with the limited staff and scope of support that I had, and really being able to juggle a full-time job and school board by night, it meant being able to be very creative with skills I had learned over the years. Obviously dog-earing pages, obviously asking lots of questions and making sure to notate where I needed to follow up with the superintendent or with staff. And I think finally, Bettina, I think it was really crucial that I tapped into the community base that had helped me during my campaign, because I really needed to leverage the support that I had, and knowing that they had issue or challenge with some of the decisions that were being made with the school board on particular votes. And so really getting their feedback was essential. And so it was a lot of creative thinking.
Now, how did you, in terms of this community feedback, mm-hmm. because you were citywide, mm-hmm. you had a full-time job, mm-hmm. I mean, how did you organize that? You didn't mm-hmm. have you didn't have a secretary, you didn't have anybody devoted. No. You're off making money and pursuing your normal career, and you apparently have this volatile issue about school closings, mm-hmm. which of course we've had up here in Fairfax, with people getting very animated about different schools. Mm-hmm. And how did you do that? How did you get that organized?
Well, first, it's about burning the midnight oil. It's about doing what you have to do for the job you sign up for, and very much the role of taking on being a leader is about carrying it through to the very finish. And I knew as soon as I signed up and said, okay, I'm here, there's something that needs to be done. It was about getting really thoughtful about, okay, I can ask staff these questions, but they are not my sole staff. And not only that, but being thoughtful about the mode of communication. You have to remember now we're in the age of technology. So I have internet access, people sending me email, I'm receiving phone calls, I'm getting letters in the mail, and campaign information, people saying they're campaigning for one side of a vote or another.
Oh, okay.
And so really being aware of how to categorize the information quickly. And so what I did was just that. I would have email and quickly print off pros and cons on a particular issue, in this case, the school closure, making sure that I was returning phone calls, each one. People had my home phone number. I'm an elected member of the public, and knowing that as a steward of the public, my obligation was to be able to respond, even if but for 2 minutes, to just say, hi, I'm quickly returning your call. So that personal touch, I think, is what's important. It is citywide, but I broke it into the neighborhoods that I overlaid with the precincts. And so being able to really divide that work for what I had to do on a given night.
Wow. It does sound like an enormous amount of midnight oil being burned and energy that's sort of like burning it out. Now, you talked about getting on the school board, and things were not what you thought they were going to be. And as you said, you started asking questions. People weren't too happy about that. And you needed to sort of pause, sort of regroup, figure out what the unspoken rules were. Now, how do you do that? I mean, are there particular techniques? I know there are people who, if they've been involved in the process and they have all of these links, they can, walk down the hallway and talk to somebody, but you're new to this. And you were not a career politician.
No.
How did you go about finding out what all those unspoken rules were so that you could be more effective as a leader?
Well, that's actually quite interesting. I think I tapped my experience that I had while working on Capitol Hill.
Okay.
The work that I did there as a legislative aide was really being a listener and really being someone who was always observant of the interaction, of the style of communication, of the alliances that were happening, the issues that were being outlaid, how they were being addressed, how particular members addressed the issues. And so my years on Capitol Hill really came into play. Second, I think that a lot of the work that I had done as a community leader, building grassroots campaigns and really working with public awareness campaigns came into play. And really being able to say, I think I see some opportunities here to really look at what do we need to do to sort of rally the efforts, and me shifting my own gear. And it was really a yeoman's task, but when you look at it in small pieces, it's about taking those courageous first steps to do that.
Okay, and you talk a lot, and you've said it a couple of times tonight already, about service and the vision and what you wanted to get accomplished. And that seems to be what gives you that sort of fortitude to say, I'm exhausted, I got one more call I got to return, or I've got one more issue I've got to tackle. That you've got to have that kind of passion in order to do it as a great leader.
Yes, that is a must. You can't do it for any other purpose than to serve other people. It's servant leadership. It is a concept that is not new, but it is one where people need to think beyond themselves. Being a leader is not just a position that one holds for him or herself, but a position about having followers and making sure to create and build that momentum. And so I take very seriously the role about being passionate, being committed, being very focused. And that was evident in my work, but also something that I talk to other leaders now, rising leaders, about how they have to sort of be in tune with that sort of inner voice and know, why are they doing what they're doing? Are they really doing it to be a leader or for some other reason?
Now, and the other thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is you drew on your experience as a leader in other fields. So for those folks who are sitting out there, for example, in Fairfax County and saying, well, I haven't actually really done so much, but I'm really passionate about this school issue or that school issue, you really have to look and assess yourself to say, am I really ready? Have I done that background work, all of those initial leadership things to sort of develop a set of skills? Because otherwise, it would seem to me that you're walking into not a good situation. There was a phrase I was going to use, but I didn't think I should. But that you really have to assess your own self as to what it is you've got in terms of where you stand as a leader already.
That's right. It really is taking stock, like we talked about when someone thinks about running for office. Being a leader is the same thing, taking stock and assessment of what it is that you want to get out of that, what it is that you have to put in, and what skills can you sort of shift as you go along. As you saw when I made the transition between entering the political process, I made the same sort of set of transitions when I exited the process. It's about being able to stay on top of your game, if you will, and really be proactive in the whole process of being at the helm.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the leadership building blocks, because you found yourself in a situation where you were expected to sort of toe the line and not create waves, and decided, as you said in your book, that you were not going to be confined to the proverbial lid-boxed, unimaginative leadership. Decided you were going to break out. And your first leadership building block is vision, which you've mentioned a couple of times. When I was reading through the book, it seemed to me there were a couple levels of vision. Your personal vision, which was to do with equity and access to public resources for education for your students. Sort of an organizational, and then a transformative of how do you go from being a regular person or a regular leader to an extraordinary leader, and having visions on all of those kinds of things. I mean, how do you develop that? Does it just come naturally to people, or do you just sit down and in your book, I think you sort of talk about how do you go from one to the next, and how important that vision is?
It's extraordinary, because I think one of the things that people forget is that in any position that we hold, if it's a PTA organization, Parent-Teacher Association, or if you're in charge of the soccer league, or if you're in charge of the community bake sale, it's about making sure that you have the objective that you're trying to accomplish, the key, the outcome, the end goal. What is it? What action plan do you have to do that? And in that, I started to develop in the role that I had as the community leader on the school board, that it wasn't just about having an action plan to follow through and sort of check off what you've done, but it was really something more transformational. And I was going through the process myself of saying it wasn't just about getting there, knowing I was going to make policy decisions, but about being a bigger impact, having a bigger impact, and making sure to look at the issues of being able to say, no, it's about making sure we do all we can to be instrumental in helping people. So it was an extremely, extremely helpful experience.
Well, good. Well, vision, I think, is always the big step, because as you say, it's more than yourself. It's being that servant leader and deciding what's important and how you want to get there, and keeping your eye on the ball, so to speak, which we are going to do, because we will be right back with Dawn McCoy for more on leadership building blocks.
You can hear them.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.